say, everybody, I'm calling from rural Illinois, and there's no Wi-Fi here, so I'm using data. So I'm trying to. We'll see if this will keep me, but so far it looks like it's stable, and I'll just, if I have to, I'll end up calling in if it kicks me, but this should work for now.
Okay, I think we're ready to get started.
Okay, we ready? Everyone ready? All right, well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to the March 11th, 2021 Planning Commission meeting. This is a special meeting and is being conducted utilizing teleconferencing and electronic means consistent with State of California Executive Order number 29-20 dated March 17th, 2020. We are conducting the meeting using the Zoom platform and streaming it live on the city website and broadcasting on Comcast channel 15, as well as via the city YouTube channel. Public members had the opportunity to submit emails to city staff. A report of all written comments was distributed to Planning Commission members via email and posted to the city's website under documents received after publishing agenda. And with that, Ms. Chan, can you take the roll?
Yes, thank you, Chair Roche. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. Commissioner Ali Sullivan.
Hi, good evening. Present.
Commissioner Bonilla.
Present. Thank you.
Commissioner Goldstein is absent. Commissioner Okenda.
Present.
Commissioner Patton.
Present.
Commissioner
Can you hear me?
Yes, we got you. Thank you. Commissioner Stevens. Do we have Commissioner Stevens here? Okay, we'll go back to Commissioner Stevens. Chair Roche.
Thank you. Yeah, I see Commissioner Stevens is on the line, but he's muted. I don't know, did somebody mute everyone and turn off videos again? Because everyone's videos are off again. Okay.
I'm able to see
Okay.
all this.
Oh, it looks like, oh no, Commissioner Stevens is still there. Okay, should I just move forward at this point?
I see Commissioner Stevens, so I'm going to acknowledge that he's here.
Okay.
Will that work for you?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, before we get started, I wanted to ask the commissioners what they thought about switching items 1 and 2 so that we could discuss the Amazon item first before we get to the general plan. And do I need to call a vote for that, or can I just ask for commissioners' approval of that? How does that work?
If there's no objection, then you can, as chair, just switch the order.
Okay, any objections to switching the orders of 1 and 2?
No objection.
No objection, okay. Hearing no, Commissioner Ali Sullivan, did you have an objection? No, okay. Okay, great. So with no objection to switching, we'll start with item 1. And before we start with the public comments, and maybe this isn't the right time, and maybe Joe, you can tell me if this is the right time, but I have an issue with item number 1, and I'm concerned about some of the last minute information we got, and I'm not sure, as far as I'm concerned, that we have the information to make this decision because there's a huge discrepancy between the applicant and the city. And I was looking to continue it. And if we're supposed to wait now till after public comments, please let me know. Otherwise, I wanted to entertain a continuance of item number 1, the new item number 1 concerning Amazon.
Madam Chair?
Sorry, Joe, did you, okay. First of all, let me ask the city attorney about that. Is this an okay time for me to entertain this?
If you wanted to see if there's a motion to continue that item, that would be fine. I would first go through the general public comment if we're going to allow that.
Okay. That's what I was wondering, if we should do the general public comments first, and I'm willing to do that. So commissioners, if you would think about it, maybe hold your comments about my continuance question, then we'll go to the public comments first and come back to that, if that's okay. No objection to that. Okay. Okay, great. Then let's start with public comments. If let's see, the public comment section provides an opportunity to address the Planning Commission on items not listed on the agenda. The Planning Commission welcomes your comments and requests that speakers present their remarks in a respectful manner. Speakers wishing to address the Planning Commission should limit their comments to 3 minutes. And now I will ask Denise Chan to moderate the public comment portion of the meeting. At the end of the public comment, we will address any questions that come up. Secretary Chan, do we have anyone in the general public comments?
Thank you, Chair. We have one attendee. Kat, do you wish to speak? If you are, you can use the raise the hand button. So far, Kat has not raised her hand.
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. So with no one calling in for public comments, I will close the public comment period. And let's go back. Let's see, let's go back to the new item number 1 concerning the Amazon site, and get back to my question about a continuance for this item based on what I feel is a lack of information on some really significant last minute changes we got. And I wanted to see if commissioners have comments about this or input on this. Commissioner Patton, did you have something you wanted to add to this?
I did,
Can I just
yes.
interrupt?
Please.
Yeah, so I would recommend if you were entertaining the continuance of this item, to go through the item and then make the motion at the proper time to continue.
You mean actually like hear the item first?
From staff, from the applicant if they're there, and get any public comment. Right, hear the item, and then when the time for a motion is made, if you still haven't gathered enough information to make the recommendation, at that time you can entertain a motion to continue, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think the point I'm trying to make is I'm not sure I'm feeling like I don't have enough information to even go through the motions and make that decision, make that recommendation at this point. And so I was looking to continue it even before we heard the discussion. But
yeah, so what I'm saying is that throughout the presentation, you may get enough information that would make you feel differently, but you won't know unless we go through the motions. So if you wanted to go through the motions, and then at that time, if we still don't have enough information,
okay.
It would be appropriate to make the motion at that time.
Okay, well, I think what I'd like to do is just hear comes, because I see commissioners have comments about this. So I'd like to hear that first, and then we'll move on to the item if that's the consensus. So if that's okay, then I'd like to do that first. So Gary, you had a comment about this?
I did. I think for me, at this point, with all the information contained within the staff report and currently on the public record, even before there are any speakers, we got several pieces of information within the last several hours that are fairly technical in terms of the response from the applicant to the staff report and the conditions of approval. We have one letter from the Amazon attorney questioning or speaking to the issue of a nexus and our ability to level the amount of mitigation fees that is recommended in the staff report. We've got a letter from Amazon questioning several conditions of approval, again, regarding traffic mitigation fees that are proposed to be applied to the project. We've got a letter from a traffic engineer questioning the traffic engineering department's methodology in terms of using the ITE standard for computing trips for this particular use. So at this point, for me anyway, we've got last minute information. It's very technical. It's germane to the project. And rather than going through a whole public hearing process, for me, I would want to have a staff response to those issues in writing. Well, two things. Number one, preferably, I would like staff to meet with the applicant and their traffic engineers, with the city traffic engineers, and try to come to some compromise on these issues. The Planning Commission hearing is not the place to have an engineering meeting or a legal meeting regarding nexus. So I would like to have staff respond to these submittals by the applicant's attorney regarding nexus. And I'd like staff's traffic engineering department to give us a written response to the methodology question in terms of how they generated the fees and the trip generation rates. Preferably, those folks can work together, resolve some of these issues so we don't have to spend time talking about those now. And when it's ready, for me, and I made a pot today. For me right now, the gumbo's not ready. I think that those folks need to get together, work out some of these issues, and not have us try to extrapolate some of this technical detail in the public forum. I don't think that's appropriate.
All right, thank you, Commissioner Patton. Commissioner Bonilla, did you want to weigh on this as well?
Sure. I appreciate your comments, Chair Roche. I think they're very astute and exactly the same way I was feeling. When I opened up my email to log into Zoom, I saw that there was 2 major attachments, each, I think, over 40 or 50 or 60 pages, didn't even get through half of one. So I don't feel prepared to discuss this topic. I also don't feel prepared to have the discussion or to even entertain the staff's presentation at this point. I think there's too many open-ended questions for me that will continue to propagate if I'm not able to read the information that was given to us 2 hours before this meeting. So I completely agree with your desire to continue this item to a future meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonilla. Commissioner Ellie Sullivan, what's your take on this? You're muted still, Ellie.
Thanks, Chair Roche. I share in my fellow commissioners' positions here. I'll differ in one point by saying I did feel very ready to discuss this item tonight because I spent a significant amount of time looking into it, researching it, thinking through it, identifying questions, comments, concerns, and felt that we were in a position to have that discussion tonight. I have to say it's disappointing on the part of Amazon that they would submit a document the day of the hearing at 2:35 p.m., basically countering all of the meat of the conditions of use permit, saying that they're not agreeing to them. And so it's very troubling that we would get to this point, literally at the 9th hour, and Amazon would now say that they do not agree with any of the requirements that are outlined in the conditional use permit. Very troubling, and not sure if, it does not appear that we're ready to discuss it tonight.
Thank you, Commissioner. Did anyone else want to weigh in on this? No, okay. All right, so with that, so now I need to go back to the city attorney about making a motion for continuance, because it was how I'm feeling. Can we put that up to vote now? Because, my feeling was I didn't think we were ready for a public discussion about getting into this and then being made to make a decision based on out of information. So what's your take on that?
Yeah, I think you've got enough support to either motion to table this item or to continue it to a date certain. So I would call on Jeremy to offer some dates when this might be continued, unless you want to motion to table it.
Okay, Jeremy?
I was just going to say that the next date that would have been available is the March 25th meeting. We currently do not have anything scheduled for that meeting date. And if you continue to a date certain, there would not be a requirement to do any sort of republication or renoticing of this. So that would be the next available meeting date, would be in 2 weeks from today.
And do you think does city staff who's available, is that enough time to negotiate these obvious, there are 2 really opposing viewpoints on this. Is that enough time to come to that kind of conclusion?
I would probably need to defer to Leah Schmidt or Alex Amiri, who have been working diligently on behalf of the city with having conversations with the applicant. So Alex, if you or Leah have any thoughts about that?
Yes, thank you.
I'll let Alex go.
My video is frozen, but hopefully you can hear me. Yes. We are ready. We can meet with Amazon at any time, after hours or weekends, or at any time to resolve these issues. I apologize that we didn't have time to resolve the issues and bring the project to you that we can both agree on. I think that we are ready to should be enough for us to be able to resolve the issues.
Okay, and Leah, did you want to weigh in? I should have asked you earlier at where you were on this.
My report is as clear as it could be. I think the issues that are causing you some concern are related to transportation engineering and those conditions of approval, and you've heard from Alex. So I was going to say I could present tonight or not, but I wouldn't be able to answer those questions for you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so hearing from Alex on that, he's willing to, make this happen as quickly as possible. So if we can go to the date certain, like you said, and save the city and the applicant time about reposting the meeting, that sounds like a good solution to me. So for March 25th, the March 25th hearing.
Madam Chair, I'll make the motion to continue this item to March 25th, 2021.
Thank you, Commissioner Patton. Do we have a second?
I'll second that.
All right, seconded by Commissioner Okenda. And so now we need to, so Secretary Chan, can you call a vote on that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I thought you were making the motion, but Commissioner Patton made the motion to continue the item to March 25th. Is that
Yes.
correct?
And seconded.
And Commissioner Okenda, seconded
Yes.
the motion, correct? Okay,
Yes.
very good.
Just for a point of clarification, just to make sure that the applicant and the applicant's team would be available to that date certain before everyone votes on it. It may be good to just clarify that they are available for that meeting time as well.
Thank you, of course, Jeremy. I'm sorry, I forgot to do that. Is the applicant available to speak on the date, March 25th? Is that a reasonable time frame for you to work on this?
Sure. This is Stephen Medilla-Williams from Amazon. Can you, first of all, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. So we're more than happy to present on the 25th of March.
Thank you. Thank you for being flexible on that. Okay, so I think we have our date and now we need a vote.
Sorry, I just had one quick comment.
Sure, sorry, Commissioner Bonilla.
Chair, the applicant is going to agree to not just come back and represent their own thing 2 weeks from now, but they're going to work diligently with planning staff between now and then to try to resolve a lot of these issues so that when it comes back in front of us, hopefully there's not going to be all of these opposing views, right?
Yeah,
That's what we're asking the applicant to do.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonilla. And if the applicant could speak to that, the reason we're continuing it is so that you will engage in negotiations with the city to come up with some clarity for us moving forward.
Sure. This is Stephen. So that's something something that we've been working on for the past several weeks. Something we're pretty comfortable with. We talked to many jurisdictions around the country, around the West Coast and in California about these type of issues. So we'll be more than happy to continue to engage the city of Hayward regarding the impact fees that are associated with this project. But again, it's something that we've been working to do literally over the past 4 to 5 weeks.
Right. I understand that, but I think we all know that we're not in an agreement yet. So I think if you're willing to continue to engage, then we will hear this again on March 25th.
Oh, yes, we most certainly are.
Thank you. And thank you, Commissioner Bonilla. Okay, a vote.
All right, thank you. Everybody can hear me?
Yes.
Yes, all right. Commissioner Ali Sullivan,
Aye.
Commissioner Bonilla,
Aye.
Commissioner Okenda,
Aye.
Commissioner Patton,
Yes.
Commissioner Stevens. Commissioner Stevens, can you unmute yourself? Commissioner Stevens, would you like to call in? Okay, Chair Roche.
Yes.
Okay, Joe? Mr. City Attorney?
Yes.
Okay, what would you like me to do about Commissioner Stevens? Because he's present, but I guess perhaps he's having an issue unmuting himself.
Is there a quorum and vote in favor of the motion so far?
We have 5.
5, yeah.
5 ayes. So we're good?
So, I mean, I would mark him absent for this vote.
Okay.
Since we can't have any contact due to technical issues.
So we have 5 ayes and 2 absent at this point. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Chan. So the motion to continue item number 1, what became item number 1, regarding the proposed zoning text amendment, will be moved to the next meeting, March 25th. Thank you. All right, with that, let's move on to our new number 2 and a general plan annual progress report.
Good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Planning Commission. Jeremy Lokirko, Principal Planner with the city. I'm here to provide more of an informational item on kind of where we are with the status update of our implementation of our plan. So let me do a nice little share screen here so you can look at what I'm looking at here. Okay.
Just want to let somebody know they're off mute. Who's not speaking, if everybody could mute, please.
Okay, can everybody see the screen? All right, wonderful. So the general plan, many of you probably know that we prepared this back in 2014, and that was really the latest update, and that was after many, many years of community collaboration on developing goals and strategies for the city of Hayward up through the year 2040. And as required by state law, we are required to report out, excuse me, on an annual basis, the progress of how we're doing with implementing all of the lovely programs that we have dedicated ourselves to do over that time frame. The general plan, as I pointed out, was adopted in 2014. It was really done so with the intent to establish the community-based vision for the city of Hayward. It does not only list all of the goals, but also there's related policies and programs that will help the city achieve that vision and those goals. And that is the culmination of those discussions, and that those goals were after a 22-month outreach process. As I pointed out, the state law does require we do a status update of the general plan implementation. And the last time that we did this was back in, that we came before the Planning Commission was back in 2019. And we were doing an annual report for the year of 2019. This year, we're looking at the year 2020. So even though we're in 2021, the report that you have before you this evening is really reflective of what we've done during the calendar year 2020. To give you kind of a general understanding of kind of where we are in total, the general plan has 143 programs throughout the plan that are slated in various timeframes. So there's a near-term estimated timeframe that started from year 1 when the plan was adopted in 2014, and then it went to a midterm up until the year 2019. And then anything what would be considered long-term would go from the year 2020 to 2040. And in the first section of the first element of the first time frame, we are at, in terms of programs that have already been completed, we have completed 18 of those 143 programs to date. In addition to that, 14 additional programs are currently in process or progress. And those are the one-time only kind of programs. In addition to the one-time only programs, there are annual or ongoing programs that are expected to be implemented over the life of the general plan. And of those, we have 80% of those that were slated to begin between 2014 and 2019 are currently underway. There are also another slew of programs that have not yet started In total, we're looking at 29 of those programs, a relative of 24% of the total number of programs. And the reason they haven't started is for a variety of reasons. Oftentimes it's due to staffing resources or changing priorities. More recently, we've had obviously issues with the COVID pandemic, and that has really delayed a lot of our implementation of what we previously were intending to get started with. But it also does require some reprioritization to deal with some more immediate community needs. In addition to those programs that were slated between 2014 and 2019, there were a couple of them that we actually got a head start on, and there were two specific programs that were slated in the long term that were moved forward, and oftentimes they're moving forward as a result. And the two programs that I'm speaking of were specifically identified as part of an update to traffic and complete streets as a result of some of the state VMT reduction strategies that we were required to implement as part of state mandates. And so a couple of those programs that weren't originally anticipated to be implemented for a long term actually got pushed to be a near-term goal, and we did complete those already. In addition to that, there are 7 programs in 2020, 2040 that are one-time kind of programs, along with 4 ongoing. And then there's also 23 that have not been started. So the good news here is that, you know, for a document that goes from 2014 to 2040, as you can see, we are making pretty good progress being 5 years, 6 years into that implementation cycle. And we would anticipate that as prioritization and as community programs continue to be embraced, those would be opportunities for us to continue to complete some additional programs for the city. So as I pointed out, a picture is always a little bit easier to digest than a table. And so this is just kind of another vantage of how our success has been. Of all of the programs that we anticipated, we've already have a majority of those, over 75%, that are either in progress or have already been completed. And like I said, 24% have yet to get started. And similarly, for the 2020 to 2040 timeframe, we've already have 36% of those that were anticipated to not even get started until 2020. 36% of those programs are already underway. And so relative to the overall number of programs that were identified in the general plan, that's a pretty good progress report. There have been some programs that were identified, and again, as I mentioned, in terms of the numeric number, this is a list of the significant, and obviously not every program is the same. Some programs and goals are a little bit more lengthy and require a lot more staff intensive to be completed. Obviously, a couple of years ago, we just adopted the downtown specific plan, and that was a monumental task in and of itself that required several years of planning and organization and community outreach. And so that one program being completed was a very staff and community intensive program, but we were able to adopt that and have that completed in 2019. In addition to that, you can see that there's a lot of other programs related to, for example, pedestrian and bicycle master plan has been updated. We've completed a shuttle service study. There's also some energy and resource business programs that were incorporated from economic development, the downtown parking management plan, ombudsman service, crime prevention through community design checklist, or what we would call SEPDED. All of those programs have been completed. As well as some other things that this commission has actually reviewed, like the parkland dedication fees, which were recently updated citywide last year. So overall, a lot of good progress has been made that reflects a lot of hard work over the last several years cycle. In addition, as I mentioned, there's 63 programs that are currently in process, and some of the more high-level ones are things such as the traffic impact fee, and those are things that are currently underway. We would anticipate that that would be completed probably in this fiscal year, but we are hoping that some of these that are currently in process that were prioritized in the earlier time frame actually get completed. In addition to the traffic impact fee, there's also some progress that have been made on construction of some class 4 bike lanes, a separated bike facility along Mission Boulevard, a business incubator study, the fire department strategic plan, and the allocation of boomerang funds, which are very specific and targeted for affordable housing. In addition to that, we've also, as I mentioned, there are some things that have not been completed, and these are mainly due to limited staff resources or fiscal resources, and/or, as I mentioned before, competing priorities. And so a couple of those very large items, large programs, for example, the comprehensive update to the zoning ordinance, that's a very time and staff intensive endeavor. That would be a multi-year review of that. And given the limited resources that we've had, that has not yet started. In addition, there's a couple of other programs that were originally anticipated to be started in that first 5 years of following the general plan adoption that have yet to be tackled, and primarily, as I mentioned, because of limited resources or competing priorities. However, there are some things, as I mentioned, that have been completed, and they are things that provided opportunities for us to kind of get ahead of the curve. We did complete in the last couple of years a complete street study. We've also adopted a neighborhood traffic calming policy. We've worked on our community emergency response team program, or called CERT, which many of you may be aware of. We've also been working on our recycled water program and adopting a local hazard mitigation plan. And then many of you may recall earlier last year, or later last year, we actually brought the Shoreline Master Plan to the Planning Commission for a study session. And that plan was adopted back in January of this year. So there's been a lot of significant progress that we've made toward implementing and completing some of those programs that were anticipated for the long-term timeframe. Now, for priorities that we're currently working on, and many of these are things that are currently underway, or they are things that are required through state mandates. And so one of those items is an update to our general plan, our housing element. And those are things that are mandated by the state to update every 5 years to really reflect the regional housing allocation needs for the Bay Area and for the community. It also provides us an opportunity to more accurately reflect and update our housing goals for the community as it pertains to Hayward and dealing with trying to meet our housing numbers. So that's something that we're going to be working on. Again, it's a priority. It's going to be a priority every 5 years for us to be doing that update. So you'll probably see this on a list pretty frequently. But that is the course that we are required to do to maintain as part of the general plan. We've also, as I mentioned before, we've also gotten some work started on our traffic impact fees, and a lot of the nexus study, I think, toward that has been completed, and we're still working on some background information before we bring that program forward. There's other things that we're currently working on, such as bike and car share. And obviously, a lot of the changing demographics and how people are currently getting to work has changed following COVID. And so obviously, looking into that and trying to figure out what the new commute patterns would look like is certainly going to be helpful when we launch that program. In addition to that, there's some other things that we're looking at doing, including industrial technology and innovation corridor marketing strategy. That's really trying to bring in large applicants and developers to the city, and how do we better market our industrial corridor area that has been recently designated as a priority production area for the Bay Area. So those are some of the minor things, but they are all individually, they're all being tackled as an opportunity for us to really prioritize for the upcoming cycle. Obviously, we're going to continue with water recycling program, and in response to some of the more recent state legislation related to energy and in response to the adoption of our REACH code, we're going to be looking at also continuing residential energy performance assessment, as well as dealing with their climate change vulnerability assessment and strategy in our annual report. So these are all, again, a lot of programs that They're underway currently. They were started obviously in last fiscal year and are probably in our last reporting cycle, but they are things that we are looking to prioritize in this year because they are currently, many of these are currently in process. In terms of what our next steps are, we are required to just provide this report along with the suite of the entirety of the status of all of the programs in the general plan. We are planning to present this report to our city council next Tuesday at their regular meeting. And then following that, we will then provide that progress report and report that to the state's Office of Planning and Research. And then that will satisfy our reporting requirement for this cycle. And then following that, we will also update the city's general plan, which is currently a web-based format that will help the community understand kind of where we are with our progress updates. And with that, I'm available to answer any questions. I can bring it back and stop sharing my screen here so we can bring it back to the commission. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Jeremy. It's nice to see all the progress that's being made. Let's see, do we have commissioner questions for Jeremy? Commissioner Ali Sullivan, please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Jeremy. Appreciate the report. Hopefully very short question. Obviously, you guys are ahead of schedule, it looks like, based on what was originally anticipated. Have the projects just been taking less time than you expected, or has staff just increased their efficiency? How were you guys able to be so far ahead of what you originally anticipated?
Well, a lot of it is, so it's kind of twofold. Some of them obviously shifting priorities, things that we originally envisioned that were going to become first in line back in 2014. There may be subsequent opportunities to obtain grants. We got a Caltrans grant, which is what helped us with the the Shoreline Master Plan, and so that was an opportunity. And why wait until 2040 if it's something that we can actually help fund now? And so in some cases, that's what you see kind of shifting priorities from a community. But as you know, things that we originally envisioned back 6-7 years ago, that will change over time. And there'll be new opportunities, there'll be new challenges. Things that we are dealing with today probably weren't quite envisioned the way they were back in 2014. And so, again, these annual reports kind of help us to kind of not only gauge the progress for implementation, but also allow us the opportunity to maybe reprioritize. And certainly council will have the ability to do that next week if there's some things that they want to maybe shift around. But certainly, now we're into that 20-year cycle between 2020 and 2040. And so obviously, there is no specific priority for any of those to move forward faster than others. But yeah, that's probably why you see a couple of those that were originally envisioned for long-term that are now being implemented on a short-term fashion.
Thank you. Commissioner Ali Sullivan, did you have anything else? Okay. Let's see, Commissioner Okenda?
Yes, hi. Just a question actually about one of the items, the traffic impact fee, transportation impact fee item that's in progress. Is that, just for my own sake, is that Nexus study looking at all aspects like housing, commercial and industrial uses contributing to traffic impact and fee assessments? Is that Nexus kind of including all those areas?
Typically they do because all of those uses do have an impact on local roadways and would have an impact on the transportation network. Obviously, some uses are going to be a little bit more intensive and more impactful, so to speak, than other uses. But typically when there's a Nexus study, they do kind of span all of the available uses. They come up with kind of what is the desired project level for the city over the long term, how much is it going to cost to build out those long-term improvements, and then usually the fee is then applied. And ultimately, if council, I've worked in a couple of cities that have done a transportation impact fee, and you'd be surprised. A lot of times the fee is a lot higher, could be charged is a lot higher than what is actually adopted. And I think part of that is just trying to balance out what is the impact for an applicant versus what are the needs for the city to be able to maintain and expand their network. So, but yeah, your question is right on that. Typically they do look at all of the land uses.
Yeah, and okay, that's helpful. And has council given guidance on including in that Nexus study, looking at the impacts on housing prices of including impact fees in housing? Is that going to be a component of that study?
I can't really speak to that. The traffic impact fees are actually being, worked through our transportation division. And so when we were providing this update, it was reaching out. Yeah.
No worries. I just thought while we were talking to ask, but I can follow up with transportation folks, and those are questions for another day. Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Bonilla, did you have some questions?
I do. Thank you. Jeremy, some of these, activities like 2020 through 2040, it's a pretty long time horizon. And with all of the implications that have resulted from COVID, do we have any idea how that might be impacting some of our longer term plans?
That's a good question. I don't think we've fully analyzed all of that yet. I think, when the last time that we came and we provided a progress report, everything was kind of business as usual. We had, obviously, I think the housing crisis presented some challenges and more of an immediate need to address that. And so you may have seen some policies related to housing kind of move up in the prioritization schedule. But ideally, obviously, the priorities that were established in the near term were all based on community conversations. They were based on conversations with council members and policy, on kind of where their priorities are for the community. The long range programs, obviously, there is a potential that some of those won't be realized. There's always a potential that some things, and I can tell you that one of the programs that I was looking at, happened to be ombudsman or outreach program coordination with HARD. And, there was a situation, I think, where they ended up losing their park officer or whatever that we were coordinating with. And so obviously, we could do a lot of work, and then something happens in another organization, it's not their priority anymore. So then it just results in a shifting priority for the city. So we will be regularly visiting these. And obviously now that we're in kind of this long-term schedule, there may be other things that would pivot something a little bit to more of immediate urgency. But obviously the goal here is just to continue to make progress. Not everything, the goal is not to be necessarily ahead of the schedule, even though we are in many aspects, but we really want to make sure that we are, implementing the programs that the community has adopted as part of the general plan update.
Because that leads into my second question, which was just around how these activities are prioritized. I know that we kind of talked about regulatory mandates, perhaps, prioritizing some things up sooner, things that are already in progress. But I guess I'm just wondering, is there a broader prioritization, framework that's being used? And, in particular, as it relates to COVID, I'm just wondering if some of those priorities may need to be adjusted just because of what we've all experienced as the world for the last year.
Yeah, and that's a good question. I know that council is currently dealing with that with their strategic roadmap planning exercises on trying to reprioritize what their immediate near-term goals would be over the next 2 to 3 year cycle. So we're currently looking at that. Many of those, the good thing about the general plan programs is that there's many different ways to approach implementation of these programs. They're not so specific that it's kind of a one size fits all. So for example, like the library's, strategic plan, that was something that was originally anticipated, to be done, shortly after or when the library was constructed. And there were some delays in construction of the library. And so they couldn't do the strategic planning effort for that until after the library was completed. And so, some things are obviously outside of the city's control, but these are again, trying to refocus the priorities. And then obviously, community needs. We didn't envision the pandemic. There may be other essential needs that are more immediate. And so those are going to be the ones that kind of ring out as being the more essential ones for implementation. Obviously some of the strategies that are listed in the general plan, are not necessarily intended to be implemented all at once. They're intended to kind of come over certain cycles and as needed. So we'll continue to look at that, and ideally, we'll come back to the Planning Commission on an annual basis and report out to the City Council and get their feedback on if there's any adjustments that they need to make.
Got it. And then for the Community Emergency Response Program, it says that the fire department successfully has trained approximately 400, they're training about 400 people annually, and they set a goal in 2018 for 240 people to, join NERT. Is there a way that we might be able to get kind of some demographic breakdowns of who's involved in those programs? Because I think when we're looking at preparedness across the city, it's important to make sure that that preparedness is sort of equitably, in all of our communities, right? Not maybe concentrated in certain areas. Because I've worked with CERT programs in the past, and sometimes they don't always work for some of our underserved or most vulnerable communities. So I would just want to make sure that we're not unintentionally leaving any groups out by implementing this program. So there's a way that maybe we can just see, I guess, where people live generally, kind of what district are they from within Hayward, so we can see if we have any pockets that we might need to focus that training on.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I can certainly ask our emergency services, fire and police, if they can provide us a general breakdown of those that have been trained already, and then I can bring that back to the Planning Commission as an informational item.
Okay, thanks, Jeremy. Sure. Those are all the questions that I have for now.
Thank you, Commissioner. Did anybody else have any questions at this point? Okay, let's see, no reason, no. I had similar questions about how things might change due to COVID. So thank you, Commissioner Bonilla, for bringing that up. I think you sort of took care of some of those questions. But just similarly, for example, the downtown plan, it seems, people want to be eating outside. I think the closed streets have been popular. And I think if it was a sort of consistent thing, I'm just wondering if that's part of the downtown plan, if they're kind of trying to pivot and look at that differently going forward.
Well, I think that's a good example. I mean, I think so. One of the programs that our economic development team has really tried to, take advantage of and really kind of promote is this the whole, partnership with the community and the ombudsman program, trying to be kind of a concierge service that they offer a lot of the businesses that are interested in coming into Hayward. And what's interesting about that is that, on the program itself may say, in creating a program, enticing and creating a concierge service to entice, businesses to come to Hayward. But there's obviously different components to that. I mean, obviously that title or that program has a different meaning today than it did maybe 2 years ago before the pandemic. And so obviously, I think realigning, what does it mean to provide that kind of service and that kind of stewardship for businesses today while we're in the middle of a pandemic, and what's that going to look like in the future? I mean, obviously that there's going to need to be some tweaking, I think, of probably what that looks like, but essentially it's still the same. I mean, I think the businesses, that are coming to Hayward still look for opportunities for, to be able to, get through the process. In some cases, it's an entitlement process. But just, what does it take to get set up locally, and what are the resources that we can provide as a jurisdiction to those businesses so that they're successful? So obviously those needs are different, like you pointed out today, than they were a year or 2 years ago. And I would imagine it's probably going to be different, 10 years down the road than it is today. So obviously those programs are going to continue to change.
Yeah, okay. And it is so hard to know. Maybe we'll all just be so glad to go back to normal. Everything will just revert. And similarly, I'm just wondering about businesses, because I think this whole sort of nature of delivering services, I think that's just going to continue. So I think, what business is going to look like in the future and having large delivery elements, I think a lot of people are probably not going to go back to, going to the grocery store. They're going to continue to get their groceries delivered. So sort of just curious, I guess I don't have a big question about that, but similarly about how COVID might relate to that, and how, we'll pivot going forward and addressing those needs for businesses that might come in as just delivery services. Okay, I didn't really have a question on that. I just wanted to come. And then the other thing, I was glad to see that the shuttle service survey was done. You know, that's something in the past I was interested in, and I saw that, you know, we're not going forward with that due to lack of funding. And if funding should come up in the future, is that sort of there's a plan ready to go, or will the survey then be taken to kind of real life application at that point?
I think it's both. I think the funding is always, the startup to be able to manage and operate a shuttle program is not inexpensive. It's usually requires a lot of partnerships, not only locally with businesses and with, in some cases, the university, but it also requires, collaboration with other transit agencies. Oftentimes AC Transit it can be a great partner in those kind of things, because you want to make sure that people that are using the shuttle have seamless ways to be able to connect throughout the network and get to where they want to go. So oftentimes, a lot of the programs, and the shuttle is a great example where, if just left to the city, it would be a very monumental task to be able to do that. But really, forging these partnerships does create opportunities. But again, it requires partnerships. It requires a lot more dedication, not only from the city of Hayward, but also from local businesses, local residents, and then other transit providers.
Okay. All right. I'll keep watching that one. Thank you. I think that was all I had for now. And thank you again. I appreciate the report. And it looks like Commissioner Okenda, did you have something else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I wasn't sure if we were able to make comments or this was just questions, but I did have a comment that I wanted to make, and I can make that whenever it's appropriate.
Yeah, I think, Jeremy, this is a question and a kind of discussion, right? We're not having to seek comment. Yeah, so go ahead, Commissioner Okenda.
Cool. Thank you for that. I just wanted to kind of put on the record that I'd like to urge council, and I've had some conversations with staff and council members about this, that I'm really interested in including in our housing element a component of fair chance housing. So working in our housing element, to making a commitment as a city to equal opportunities for housing for people who have conviction histories or arrest histories. It's just with COVID releases and shifting political winds on our approach to and elimination of mass incarceration and other issues around the criminal justice system and reforms and releases from prisons and jails and closures of prisons and jails. I think it's more important than ever that we have equal opportunity to housing for all of those people. And I just think that, of course, the general plan and the housing element within that general plan are critical components to making sure that that portion of our population are protected like other vulnerable members of our community. And we need to recognize that, criminal history, over-policing, mass incarceration disproportionately affect Black and Brown communities and poorer communities and neighborhoods around Hayward included. And those have proxy relationships to discrimination based on race and disability and national origin and immigration status. And it's just really important, I think, to acknowledge that connection and to add that, in my view, into our planning and vision for how we produce inclusion and compassion and equity in the city of Hayward in our general plan and housing element. So I just wanted to add that for the record in the minutes moving forward. And I definitely am going to keep having conversations with staff and city council. And I'd love to see that grow into a more explicit component of how we're planning in our city and how we're including people in our community.
Thank you for that comment. I will just note also, as you pointed out, one of the things, since we are beginning our process of doing an update to our housing element, one of the things that kind of ties in with what you had mentioned, Commissioner Okenda, is we are going to be looking at including an environmental and social justice component to that, which is now required by the state. It's a state mandate that all the housing elements should be looking at those things as well. So that is going to be a new addition, and there's probably going to be some very specific policies related to that, which currently don't exist in our housing element that I would anticipate would be included. So definitely,
Super excited to have that conversation. Thank you for sharing that, Jeremy. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And Commissioner Bonilla, did you have some follow-up questions?
Yeah, just one super simple, quick question. So, Jeremy, on page 20, under the EDL for the Education Program Award, where it says in 2017, the library director, and is that like the Education Services Manager?
Well, yeah. So
is that what the ED stands for? I wasn't sure what that was.
Yeah, well, interestingly enough, so a lot of, originally when those policies, when we adopted that, some of our divisions were slightly different. It was library and community services. Well, now we've kind of separated that out and we have a separate library division and community services as a separate division. It's probably, I think it's referring to the library director.
Oh, because it says and ed services manager. I just wasn't sure what the ed was, if that was just short for education.
Education. Yeah.
Oh, got it.
And that was the title, I think, at the time.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you. And Commissioner Kenda, your hand is still up. Did you have something you wanted to add?
My mistake. I forgot to turn it off on my cell phone.
Okay. That's okay. And I wanted to make sure that we open up public comments for this item. If there are any members of the public that wanted to weigh in on our comment on the general plan presentation.
Thank you, Chair. We have one attendee. If you wish to speak and you are using the Zoom application, please click the raise hand button. So far, our attendee has not raised their hand. Okay. Thank you.
So it looks like, okay, I just want to make sure I didn't forget that. Okay, so I'm going to close the public comment period for this item. And thank you, Jeremy, for that presentation and for all the great updates about what's going on. And thank you, commissioners, for your comments on the general plan. Let's move on to, let's see.
Sorry, before we move on, can I make a few comments?
Go ahead, Commissioner Bonilla.
Thanks. Thanks, Chair. I just was asking kind of some questions earlier, but I did have something, Jeremy, that I wanted to see if we could, reconsider or somehow prioritize differently. But when I looked at, it's like it's the CS 10, 11, and 12, and it's around disaster readiness for the city. I wasn't pleased to see that the progress that was made in those spaces. So for an example, the disaster preparedness program, where the, city has funded somebody who is, not where we still don't have a comprehensive plan. And that just seems like it needs to be a priority. I mean, we're an earthquake country. We see the impacts of global warming, all that stuff, right? I mean, I'm preaching to the choir here. And then when we talk about disaster drills, this is talking about fire drills. We need to really talk about disaster drills and how the city would respond in the event of a large earthquake, in a comprehensive way. So I'm just wondering if there's, something that we can take back, or, my feedback, at least on those three items, is I think that they need to be prioritized, sooner. Two of these things were due in 2016 and are still in progress. And it feels like an earthquake or some kind of disaster is just a ticking time bomb, and we need to be ready for that.
Yeah, thank you for your comment. Again, the purpose is not to reshuffle the priorities that council has already established when they adopted this. I mean, I think it's really up to them at this point, and based on their availability. So the updates that were provided were really more reflective of the comprehensive, all of the departments that have a piece of these programs to implement are all we're all responsible to kind of provide those updates. So I can share that, but ultimately, the council, it's their, obviously, and its opportunities again for funding. But, as I mentioned, there's a lot of programs in there that probably for one reason or another were not implemented. And I can't, unfortunately, I'm not really in a position to explain why they were or weren't, but just more being the messenger here is providing the update and the status.
Yeah, I guess it's just my only comment is I guess I'm just not really pleased with the progress in those areas and the sense of urgency given to them, considering everything that's going on around us and the risks that we know that we're living with. That's all. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Akenda, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I really appreciate, I know Ray is an expert in disaster, kind of responses and resiliency. And so I really appreciate Commissioner Bonilla for raising that point and elevating that issue as important. And so I guess just to jump on that, I would urge, I support, your comments on that, Commissioner Bonilla. And I think that I would also like to see if possible, somewhere in the record, if it could be known that, those comments were made. I definitely support urging the council to consider ways they could bump them in priority as just a recommendation. I definitely stand with Commissioner Bonilla on that, and I hope that message makes it to council in their consideration of the issue. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Did anyone else want to make any comments at this point? Okay, with no further comments, then we will, right, because we're not making a decision, it was just a report, right, Jeremy? Okay, so then we can move on to our next item, which is the approval of the minutes. Can I entertain a motion for approval of the minutes?
I move to approve the minutes from February 11th, 2021.
Thank you, Commissioner Akenda. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Commissioner Bonilla. All right, Secretary Chan, we have a motion to approve the minutes by Commissioner Akenda and a second by Commissioner Bonilla. If we could call a vote on that.
Thank you, Chair. Commissioner Ali Sullivan.
Aye.
Commissioner Bonilla.
Aye.
Commissioner Okenda.
Yes.
Commissioner Patton. I'm sorry, you're muted, Commissioner Patton.
Abstain?
Commissioner Stevens? I'm sorry, that's yes? Okay, thank you. Chair Roche?
Yes.
Thank you. That's 5 yeses, 1 absent, and 1 abstain.
Thank you. And with that, the motion to approve the minutes is approved. Thank you, everyone. And we are moving on to commission reports. Do we have, let's see, and it looks, do we have any reports, Jeremy, for this evening?
Just a couple of quick reminders for those that are interested in attending the League of California Cities Planning Commissioner Conference at the end of this month. If you have interest and not have yet to respond, then please let me know by tomorrow if you would like to attend that. In addition, if you have any interest in the Planning Commissioners American Planning Association membership, if you could also let me know by tomorrow, that way we can process those registrations. The only other thing that I wanted to just comment on is this is, well, it was going to be Commissioner Patton's last meeting on April, actually it was going to be this meeting, but because of the continued item, it looks like we will have one more meeting, the second meeting of March for the Amazon, so that will return. But Commissioner Patton submitted his resignation on April 1st, and former council member Al Mendel will actually be serving as a planning commissioner for the near term, for temporary term, beginning sometime in April and probably continuing until there is a full commission recruitment sometime later this fall. So I just wanted to let everyone know that we will be joined with another commissioner, a new commissioner slash former city council member next month. And that's all for the reports.
Thank you. Do we have any commissioner announcements? Commissioner Ali Sullivan.
Yeah, just wanted to thank city staff and Jeremy for the APA activities. I'm looking forward to that over the next couple of weeks. So thank you for organizing that for us. I'm disappointed. I had a double shot of espresso. I was preparing for a very long meeting tonight, and now I'm going to be up late with nothing to do. So looking forward to seeing everyone in 2 weeks for a good meeting.
Thank you for those comments. Anyone else want to comment at this point? Make an announcement? No? Okay, I agree. I thought this was going to be a much longer meeting. I wasn't sure where we were going to go with the Amazon items. So I appreciate everybody's input on that. And thank you, Jeremy, for the great presentation tonight. And with that, we are adjourned. I hope everybody has a nice rest of their evening. Thank you.
You too, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great meeting.
Great meeting. Stay safe, everybody.
Has stopped.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good evening. Bye.